I want to thank you for being here. I know that life of a student is hectic, if we just use one word. Years ago, there's a legend that Columbus came back from his trip and he was at a dinner where they were honoring him. And there was a cynic in the crowd who said, you know, you didn't do anything that I or anybody else in this room couldn't have done. All we had to do was get in a boat, go west, and we'd bump into the New World. And he said, all right, before every one of you is a boiled egg. Will you please stand your boiled egg on its end? And of course, everybody tried to do that with their boiled egg. And you know, boiled eggs, they boil on their side, and they're a little side heavy, and they couldn't do it. And he watched and patiently waited for them all to fail. And then he picked up his egg, and he said, now that I've shown you how, anyone can do it. Knowledge can be learned. What is taught here at the university, and any other university, was learned outside of the university environment. What a university does is concentrate, package, and present. And that's what I'm doing today. This is unusual because I rarely speak in front of a university crowd. It's usually a group of entrepreneurs, business owners, and managers. And I always tell them something you already know, and that is at the university when the professor walks into the classroom and says good morning, freshmen say good morning back, and seniors write it down. So, each of you have a workbook, and the intent is to stimulate some thought in your minds today. And if you have ideas, they come to mind, there's plenty of room to be writing the things down that come to mind. So please feel free to write things down as you think of them. We have 90 minutes and a lot to cover. So let's start with something that I refer to as a landmine in business. Let's talk about embezzlement. Are there any in this group that are business owners or managers? Okay. When I ask this question in an environment where entrepreneurs are present, we usually have 3/4 raise their hands. And now, let me ask you this question. Do you know that one business in 4 on any given day is being embezzled? Usually I can count the people and say how many are here. Do any of you think you're being embezzled today? Usually, all hands stay down. But every once in a while, someone will raise their hand and they'll say, I'm being embezzled. And everybody will turn and look and go, oh. But, you know, the sad truth is that one business in 4 in any business group is being embezzled, and that might be the only guy that knows. Now, everyone is at risk of being embezzled. But you can reduce your exposure to being ripped off. Now I'm going to give you some ideas about how things are done. A common thing is phony accounts payable invoices, payments made to vendors that you do not know, or amounts to a vendor that you don't know for an unknown purchase. Now what embezzlers will then do is collect those checks and deposit them in their own accounts. There's another common thing where embezzlers will sidetrack accounts receivable payments. They will cash those checks and, well, there goes your money. Unfortunately, they also usually have access to the accounting system, so they will adjust the accounts receivable and they will adjust do the bank reconciliation. They can cover their trail nicely. So, what do you do? Well, I'll give you some answers in a minute. The third thing that often happens is there are ghost employees for your company. Now this happens in larger companies where you have a branch location or a remote location and someone will be on the payroll that you haven't met and never will because they don't exist. And their paycheck will be deposited or handled by a supervisor, and that employee never will exist. So how do you reduce your exposure? The first thing you do, as the entrepreneur, you have your bank statement come to your home address. Then you open the bank statement and you read what's in there. Look at every check. Do you know that person they're payable to? And if you do know them, do you know why they received those checks? Probably 75-80% of all embezzlers are caught when they go on vacation, and the owner or manager of the business just happens to look through the bank statement and they see something they don't recognize. And when the embezzler gets back, they're confronted and the reality is finally brought to light. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that the person who opens the mail isn't the same one who does the accounting, is not the same person who does the bank reconciliation, is not the same person who sends out the statements, is not the same person who calls to see where payments are. Quite often we hear people say, I have an accountant and I would trust him or her with my life. In a way, that's exactly what you're doing. You are trusting your economic life to someone else. 1 business in 3 that gets to bankruptcy court gets there because of an embezzler. I'm sure you've seen on TV where the bank robbers snatch the branch manager in the morning and they have him drive to the bank and he opens the vault. That's not really true. It can't happen that way because bank managers only have 1/2 of the combination. I used to be a banker. I had the second half of the combination. 2 others had the second half and 3 others had the first half. Any combination of us could open the vault. Dual control reduces the opportunity for embezzlement, or in this case, getting into the bank vault. Years ago, I was up to Logan writing credit reports, and I was on North Main. I went in to see a small furniture store, and as I walked in, there was furniture stacked. Have you ever seen couches stacked? It's kind of unusual. The owner of the place had no credit rating, and I looked, and he had a history of slow payments. When I went in to see him, I asked, what had caused the problems? And, small furniture store on North Main and Logan, you think it was because he was competing with some big stores. But the reality is, he said, I came to work one day, and I saw that my brother hadn't made it to work yet. He usually opened the store. Later, he never showed up. In fact, he never did show up. He was missing, and so was $140,000. This was my brother. Well, I went to my lawyer and I went to my accountant, and they told me that I was bankrupt, that I should file bankruptcy. You see, the problem was this. All those people trusted me. I trusted my brother. It wasn't their problem, it was mine. So for the next 5 years, this guy continued to make payments on the past due amounts that he had, and because people trusted him, he continued to get a little bit of credit, just enough to stay in business, and it took him 5 years. When I got there, he had finally paid everything off. And I reviewed his status and his financial statement and his payment record, and we changed his credit rating. We assigned him a credit rating. He now had a good credit rating. Not only that, but I wrote a little bit of history in there about his embezzlement. There are a few people out there in business with the integrity of this man. Unfortunately, embezzlement is done by, could be anyone, including this man's brother. Years ago, there was a guy up in Kemmerer, Wyoming, and if you don't know where that is, it's halfway between Lost and Gone Forever. It's just about this far from nowhere. And this guy had a country store. In his country store, he would sell clothing. And he found that if he had a shirt that sold for 25 cents, that the customer would buy it for 25 cents and the clerk would put the money in the pocket, and quite often it would either accidentally or on purpose never make it to the register. And if there were a pair of pants that were $1, sometimes that dollar would end up in a pocket or a shirt pocket and never make it to the register. So he came up with an idea. I'm going to price those shirts at 24 cents, and those pants are going to be 99 cents. That way, the clerk has to go over to the register to get change. The guy that owned that store was named James Cash Penny, and it was J.C. Penney. He started clear up there in the middle of the boondocks. So why do we talk about embezzlement? Why do we start a seminar about business with embezzlement? Well, because in business, this is a landmine, something you want to avoid. And a lot of people are in denial. Well, it could never happen to me. Well, this is something that we would describe as putting your head in the sand. And I want you to picture that. When your head's in the sand, your butt's in the air, and that's not a good position.